Hi, Namaste, my name is Henry Jadikaya, and this is the last video that I'm going to do talking about Papaji. A few days ago, I was reading this book, Reminiscence of Kunja Swami, a devotee of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharishi. For those of us who know the life story of Bhagavan, we know that as soon as he arrived in Tiruvannamalai, he entered in a deep state of samadhi, so much that he forgot about his body. He did not mind that his flesh was being eaten up by mosquitoes and vermins. And later on he said something to the effect that if people knew what type of bliss I was experiencing in that state of samadhi, and then periodically Bhagavan would enter, so to speak, in state of samadhi. Kunja Swami described that when Bhagavan was living in Skandashram, when his mother was there, when his brother was there, sometime before lunch people would sing hymns and he would enter in deep samadhi for a long period of time. And Kunja Swami said that the only thing that could bring him out of the samadhi was to blow a conch shell in his hair for a long time. And then gradually Bhagavan would come out of that samadhi. Now there's many Advaita teachers around the world, but how many of them have experienced that type of samadhi? And from what I understand, no one has ever seen Papaji in one of those samadhi. Like many Advaita teacher, he talks very well. High theology, will talk over and over about the self, but did he really realize the self? And many of his so-called disciples, Gangaji Moji, Andrew Cohen, they can give good talks, but none of them has entered in deep state of samadhi in public like Sri Ramana did. It is obvious that Papaji had a very strong personality, and one of his big mistake, as far as I'm concerned, was to tell possibly a dozen people or more that they were enlightened. And many of those so-called disciples came to the Western world, and many of those so-called disciples that were told that they were enlightened came back to the Western world and created a lot of problems for a lot of people. So I think that Papaji telling so many people that they were enlightened ultimately caused confusion for those people, and even more for those people that became followers of the so-called enlightened beings. I really like this story from Sam Harris. He said that he knew a woman that was a follower of Papaji, and Papaji told her, "You are enlightened. And then she went around telling people, I have no more thoughts. I am enlightened. Until she went with Sam Harris to a Buddhist retreat, and she told the Buddhist master, I have no more thoughts. Okay, said the Buddhist master, we'll sit here and wait to see if any thoughts are coming up. And for sure, within minutes, she went, oh yeah, I have one thought here. Oh, another thought there. And then she realized that, like everybody else, she had those 60,000 thoughts that all of us have every day. But this shows the force of the personality of Papaji in telling this lady that she was enlightened, created in her the belief that she was really enlightened. So I decided today that I would include a testimonial of Sam Harris that sat with Papaji for many times. It's a very positive testimonial that demonstrates that Papaji had some Shakti. He could be extremely charismatic, but as far as we know, he never did experience trance of samadhi like Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharishi. He might have helped many people to discover that they are not the body, that they are not the mind, that they are the self. But knowing that you are the self and realizing that you are the self, as Bhagavan demonstrated, is two different things.
I just want to kind of echo some of the claims you're making about what it was like to meet and study with Punjaji, because he was a truly extraordinary person. And in some ways, I have a kind of an unusually clear view of that, because he continued to impress me even when I didn't want to be impressed by him. And even when I was studying with Dzogchen masters whose teaching I thought was truer or better or more complete, when I would go back to see Punjaji, I was just bowled over by his presence. And scientifically, I'm kind of at a loss to account for the effect he was having on people. I mean, it was I came to see him several years after you were there. I think it was 91 or 92 was the first time I met him. It was still quite a small scene. I mean, he had not yet been discovered by the orphans of Osho's community. So, I mean, there were probably maybe 5 people in the room when the 5 of us showed up. So it was still a very intimate situation with him. And he, I mean, one variable was that he spoke perfect English, right? So you're not dealing with a translator. And so that allowed for, unbroken eye contact with him. And he had these extraordinary eyes and made just unrelenting eye contact. So that's part of it. But there was just a kind of induction into his energy that people experienced where it was very common to sit with him for an hour. And I mean, those of us who had spent, months on meditation retreats, at that point I had sat, a 3-month retreat in IMS, and I'd sat many 1-month and 2-month retreats. And I mean, I can attest that sitting with him for an hour felt like sitting for a month on retreat. And I just, I have no idea what the physics of that situation is, but it's just, it was something that was happening, and it would happen even when I was critical of what he was saying, right? Where I was not actually a true believer in what he was teaching and how he was teaching it. And so he was incredibly useful for me. we'll get into some of perhaps the points of criticism we may or may not share about what he was teaching. But I completely understand the experience you had of, staggering away from his house, feeling this onrushing of energy and bliss and unconditional love. And I mean, it was really like, an MDMA slash mushroom trip being with him.
Indeed.
The first was that he was personally the most charismatic representative of this whole project I'd ever met, right? So he was just, like there was like light seemed to be shining out of his eyes. So he really was he read as the kind of prototypical SHAKTI-filled guru, right? And that was communicated on many levels. And one level was certainly somewhat spooky. I mean, at least I have no explanation for it, which is there was like an energy about him that, I found undeniable even when I was disposed to deny it. I mean, there was not a lot of scope for confirmation bias here, because at a certain point I became convinced that his teaching was mistaken in some very important ways, and that he was actually doing people harm. And, he would have done me harm had I not had my wits about me. And when I finally got the teaching in hand that I thought really, really delivered the full message, which was the Dzogchen teachings in Tibetan Buddhism, and I met, some of the great Dzogchen masters of that time and started studying with them, I still made one or two subsequent trips to sit with Punjaji because he had been so valuable to me in other ways, and I found him so attractive and, just as a person. And so on those trips, it might have just been one. It might have just been one, like 10-day time with him. I was fully invested in wanting the Tibetan lamas, the Dzogchen masters who I was studying with, to be more charismatic than he was, right? Because I agreed with their teaching, and yet in his presence, I mean, there was some analog to what was going on with him with several other teachers I spent time with, but I mean, he had it turned up to just 1,000 watts, and it was amazing. I mean, so it was so one of the aspects of this experience. I mean, this is the part that I really can't explain. Just sitting with him, just being in the room with him, felt like being in the third month of a 3-month meditation retreat. I mean, I just felt myself more or less instantly inducted into a completely blown out parasympathetic nervous system state, right? I mean, it was just unbelievable. And it was happening in defiance of my desire to kind of prove him wrong. So that's the only evidence I can give you that I wasn't, totally fooling myself. But it was quite an amazing effect, and it was an effect obviously he was having on many other people, but he certainly had that effect on me.